Remakes and remasters are a great way for older games to be introduced to a new generation. However, the process of remastering an older game isn't always as simple as some people think, and sometimes you can actually end up with something far worse than the original. Welcome to ChaosGaming, everybody. Today we're going to be checking out some of the worst remakes and remasters of all time. Now, just to be clear, we're only going to be talking about direct remasters and remakes of older games. We will not be including reimaginings like Resident Evil 2 and 3. This is going to be a list of true one-to-one remakes and remasters, okay? Older games for newer hardware. If that sounds fair, drop a like, make sure you're following the page, and let's go. Let's start off with Parappa the Rapper Master. Parappa the Rapper Master? That's, a widely hated remaster of the classic PS1 game. Parappa the Rapper was a lighthearted rapping game released in '96 that is widely considered to be the first rhythm game ever. In 2017, it was remastered and brought to the PS4, but it was extremely clear this was rushed through development. The game launched completely busted, and to my knowledge, they never fixed it. Now, in a rhythm game, the whole point is to do certain actions in time with the music, but in the remastered version, the timing was screwed up. So doing things in time with the song would actually cause you to miss the notes. Now, many players pointed out that you could literally just hit random buttons on the controller and get better scores than if you actually hit them in time with the music like the original game. Parappa the Rapper, why is that so hard to say? Remastered was a total train wreck and a horrible representation of the PS1 classic. Next up, Doom 3 BFG Edition. Now, Doom 3 was already a controversial game due to its dramatic departure from the series roots, but that doesn't mean it was bad. Doom 3 was a very solid shooter with some extremely spooky elements thrown in. However, ID Software made some major slip-ups with the BFG Edition. Now, the original Doom 3 was released on the PC and the Xbox in 2004, while the BFG Edition was released in 2012 for the PC, the 360, and the PS3 as a way to bring the game into the new generation. Most of the games remain intact, right? ID Software tried to use the BFG Edition as an opportunity to address some of the criticisms of the original game, only to make those elements even worse in the process, unfortunately. Aside from the lighting and controls being a massive step backwards from the original, this one had extremely long load times and for some reason way more ammo and weapon pickups, which just made the game easier and less suspenseful. The BFG Edition also changed the flashlight mechanic from the original game, which some people saw it as an improvement, others thought it completely destroyed the horror elements. I'll tell you now, the best way to play Doom 3 is the original version. I'll just leave it at that. Next up, HalfLife Source. The original Half-Life is one of the greatest FPS games ever made, and it still holds up to this day, but a lot of fans of the original like to forget about this remaster from 2005. HalfLife Source was a total copy-paste of the original game into Half-Life 2's improved engine, which you would think that'd be good, right? Right? Wrong. It was wrong. Half-Life 1 textures were thrown into the Half-Life 2 engine, which made them feel extremely out of place. Half-Life 2 also had a new physics engine, which totally screwed up half the Half-Life 1 levels, resulting in new bugs. Half-Life Source is probably the worst possible way to experience this classic FPS, and Valve has practically disowned it since its release. If you want to play it, go play the original game, or play the Black Mesa remake. Both of them are infinitely better than this, okay? Next up, Tomb Raider Anniversary Wii version. This was released in 2007 for the 7th gen of consoles, and it was a great way to introduce new gamers to the series. The game was a remake of the original Tomb Raider from PS1, but featured greatly improved graphics and smoother gameplay. The level design, it stood the test of time, and Tomb Raider Anniversary is a solid remake, unless you played on the Wii. The Wii port of Tomb Raider was a train wreck. It featured a terrible camera, a much worse frame rate, and the addition of motion controls, which seriously screwed with the flow and pacing of the original game, like motion controls always do. Now, a note to all video game developers, stop shoving motion controls into remakes of classic games. Tomb Raider Anniversary got solid reviews on the main platforms, but the Wii version was absolutely destroyed. Next up, Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Now, this is a rather recent entry, and while the games themselves may be perfectly acceptable, it gets a spot on the list for how it was distributed and how little it actually improved. Super Mario 3D All-Stars was a collection of classic Mario titles bundled together for the Switch, released last year. The collection included Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, Super Mario Galaxy, 3 of the most beloved games in the series. So why was it controversial? Well, because Nintendo barely did anything to improve the original games or update them for the modern hardware. The frame rates, low and choppy. There was bugs. And to add insult to injury, Nintendo was charging $60 for these games, and it was a limited run for whatever reason. You can't even buy it now. So yes, the games in this collection are excellent, but the way this package was distributed was a slap in fans' faces. At number 5 today, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD. Not to be confused with the Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake from 2020. Pro Skater HD was a remake of the first 2 Pro Skater games released for the Xbox Live Arcade in 2012. Developed by Robomodo, Pro Skater HD was a collection of levels from the first 2 Pro Skater games while borrowing most of its gameplay from Pro Skater 3, making it this weird Frankenstein's monster of a game. Now, in theory, it's a greatest hits, I guess, but it didn't work out that way. Low frame rate, full of bugs, just classic levels were cut, massive chunk of original games content and soundtrack gone. It wasn't in the spirit. It was ripped apart by everybody, basically. I mean, Activision pulled it from digital storefronts. Thankfully, they came to their senses and gave us the excellent Pro Skater 1 and 2 remake last year, which kept all the content from the original games intact. So, if you've never experienced Pro Skater HD, consider yourself lucky. This next one, I tried. Crysis Remastered. The original Crysis is one of the most important PC games of all time. Heck, the game came out in 2007. It still looks better than most FPS titles now. So when Crytek announced in 2020 they were going to be releasing a remastered version of the already gorgeous game, the gaming world went into a frenzy. We all thought this remastered version would be nearly lifelike and possibly the best looking game ever released, but woo, we were wrong. It dropped in September of 2020 to bad reviews. I mean, it was bad, guys. Underwhelming in every way. Technical issues, absurd system requirements for the PC version. You could just go play the original. It was later revealed the game is actually a remaster of the downgraded Xbox 360 and PS3 versions of Crysis 1, not the PC version that everybody loved. How about some Turtles? TMNT Turtles in Time ReShelled. Turtles in Time was released in arcades in '91. Many consider it to be the best arcade ever made. I agree. But in 2009, Ubisoft released a remake of the original called Turtles in Time ReShelled, and they put it on the Xbox Live Arcade. On the surface, looked like a slam dunk. Classic side-scrolling beat-em-up from the 90s with enhanced visuals and ported to the extremely popular 360. What could go wrong? Well, I'm glad you asked. Everything. Much of the game was now on a 3D plane instead of a classic 2D one, which added a whole pile of problems. The art style, it was changed. There was no option to go back to the original, which irritated longtime fans. A lot of enemy behavior was also tweaked to make it feel more like a modern game as opposed to a remake of a game from the 90s. But what's the point of remaking a game in the 90s if you're going to add a whole bunch of weird, subtle changes? Now, despite the game being 4-player co-op like the original, there's no drop-in, drop-out feature, which was a feature all the way back in 91. It was a downgrade across the board. It sucked. At number 2, Warcraft 3 Reforged. No-brainer pick here. Warcraft 3 is one of the most influential games ever. It's perhaps the most important game in Blizzard's entire category. I mean, it put them on the map. Fans were eager to experience the Reforged version, which was supposed to be the original game, but with new visuals, more gameplay features, and completely redone cutscenes. So, what did we get? Well, the game launched on the PC early 2020 to critical panning because simply, we were lied to. Aside from the fact that Warcraft 3 Reforged was nearly unplayable thanks to the bugs, there was also a laundry list of features cut that Blizzard never told us about. Stuff that was in the promotional material, gone. Vanished without a trace. So once Reforged released, the original Warcraft 3 was pulled from sale. So if you want to play Warcraft 3 in 2021, your only option is the awful remaster. Complete and utter crap. At number 1, Silent Hill the HD Collection. Perhaps the most disappointing remaster of all time. Now, the Silent Hill HD Collection had an extremely troubled production cycle that ended up taking some of the most critically acclaimed horror games of all time and turning them into a buggy, nearly unplayable abomination. It was a port of both Silent Hill 2 and 3 for the Xbox 360 and the PS3. However, the ports were not handled by the original developers. Instead, it was handed off to a small, inexperienced studio with a very small resume. Then, to make matters worse, the final gold pressings of both Silent Hill 2 and 3 had been lost by Konami over the years, meaning the new developers had to use unfinished builds of both games to not only update them for new hardware, but practically rebuild big chunks of the game from scratch. So not only was this new development team trying to remaster games that were built for the PS2, but they were also reconstructing missing assets and fixing decade-old bugs on computers that they weren't built to handle such archaic software. The end result was an absolutely terrible representation of two of the best horror games ever made. So if you ever wonder why Konami doesn't release Silent Hill 2 or 3 for modern hardware, It's because they literally don't have the final builds anymore, and the last time they tried to fix them, we ended up with the Silent Hill HD collection. These games are all-time classics, but if you want to play them, I urge you to either track down the original PS2 copies or use an emulator. Stay far, far away from the HD collection. And there you have it, my friends. Some of the worst remakes and remasters ever. It just didn't go right. You guys let me know where you agree or disagree, and I'll see you soon.